And I'm joined now by Albie Amankona, who is a political commentator and co-founder of the campaign group Conservatives Against Racism for Equality. Thank you so much for joining me, Albie.
Good afternoon,
Albie,
David.
What's your view? Should these people be sacked for their racism and their misogyny?
David, I think I'll start off by saying that the vast majority of firefighters across the country do an amazing job, risking their lives every day to keep us all safe. Now, it is very disappointing to see these reports of institutional misogyny, racism and other forms of discrimination within the London Fire Brigade, and to see it so comprehensively reported on by Nazir Afzal, who you just spoke to earlier on. Now, on the specific question about whether or not these people should be fired, I think we need to kind of employ a sense of proportionality. I think for the most offensive offences, if you will, absolutely, I think sacking is something that we should do. But for other ones,
what would you include in the most offensive?
Well, I think from the reports that we've seen earlier on today of, nooses being put over black people's lockers, of people receiving video calls of others exposing their genitalia at people, putting bacon in a Muslim colleague's sandwich. I mean, those are pretty serious offences, and I think it would be perfectly reasonable to sack someone who had committed an offence like that. But right. Also, I think it's important that organisations look at a whole range of sanctions which are available, whether or not that could be fines which are paid for out of people's pay that could then go on to fund the training courses that they need, so then the whole operation is cash flow neutral, whether or not it is just the training courses themselves. We've got to look at the whole range of sanctions which are available, but I think it is telling that if actually no one has been sacked at all, then perhaps the sanctions aren't being applied strenuously enough.
Now, you're a Conservative. We had the Sewell report at the end of last year. It caused a lot of controversy, the report, in many, many ways. But it was very reluctant to find anything like institutional racism present in our society. This report has found institutional racism in the fire service. Where do you think we are? It's 2022. I thought this report was shocking. It was just utterly shocking. And it's shocking because this is London. It's a diverse place. You'd expect this to be differently. There's a young man in this force who has taken his own life, very sadly, because of what he was experiencing. Nazir Afzal said that, very sadly, he found other suicidal people as he went about doing his work into misogyny and racism in the force. Yet the broader canvas from the government was that things actually have improved in this country. How do you reconcile this, Albie?
Racism and issues of racial inequality in this country have improved since the 20th century. I mean, if we look at the evidence, that is absolutely the case. But it is also true that racial disparities do still exist in this country. And the Sewell report did not deny that racial disparities exist in this country. Now, I'm not particularly interested in getting into an academic argument about whether or not institutional racism exists. I'm more interested in the recommendations. And of course, in the Sewell report, there are about 70 recommendations in the Inclusive Britain strategy that came out earlier on this year, which are aiming to close racial disparities in this country. And I think actually what we should be focusing on are how quickly can those recommendations be implemented to actually close those disparities, rather than get into a debate about institutional racism. All political parties agree that racial disparities exist in this country. It's about tackling those disparities directly and the practical steps that governments can take to close them.
Some might say it's about why those disparities exist, and that, i.e. those disparities exist because we still have a tolerance for institutional racism.
Some might want to know why those disparities exist. I'm more interested in closing those disparities and actually solving the problem. If the implementation of these policies actually close racial disparities in this country and actually solve the problem, then we will no longer be having this conversation. It's time to be focused on problem solving rather than academic debates about semantics, essentially.
Albie Amankona, who's a political commentator and co-founder of the group Conservatives Against Racism for Equality. Thank you for joining me and equipping yourself so well on this thorny subject. Very grateful indeed.